All right, guys, so the Democrats are trying to fundraise off of Roe versus Wade being overturned while simultaneously admitting we're not going to do anything. There's 1,000 plans that people have laid out. Hey, here's how you can respond in a way that's really substantive that would protect abortion rights. And they're not hearing any of it. In fact, Biden outright rejected a bunch of those things. Well, voters are not buying it. Now, in a later segment, I'm going to get to the polling on Roe versus Wade being overturned, and it's pretty much exactly what you expect. I mean, it's a very straightforward thing. People are just flat out against it in stunning numbers. But let me give you some specifics of how people are responding. So here's pro-choice protesters in Texas. Now, by the way, the protests are happening all across the country. All across the country, we're seeing a whole bunch of protests. And some of them are, there's some vicious, jackbooted thugs cracking down in totally unfair ways. Jodie Sweetin, who was one of the actors on Full House. Remember when she was a kid? I think she played Stephanie, I think her name was. She was just hurled to the ground by cops in L.A. when she was protesting. That's just one example. There's been a bunch of them. But listen to what these Texas protesters are chanting. Voting blue is not enough. Democrats, we call your bluff. We're in a different political time, man. Warmed over neoliberal corporatist bullshit is not selling anymore. It ain't working. It ain't working. But I got more for you. This was on MSNBC, the home of the corporate Democrats. Listen.
For abortion rights. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate it. So talk to me first about why it is you wanted to come out here today, because something that struck me was when you were speaking earlier and you mentioned your anger because you had received a text message from the Biden campaign. Why is that?
So I received a text message from Joe Biden's campaign yesterday saying that the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade and that it was my responsibility to then rush $15 to the Democratic National Party. And I thought that was absolutely outrageous because my rights should not be a fundraising point for them or a campaigning point. They have had multiple opportunities to codify Roe into law over the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they haven't done it. And if they're going to keep campaigning on this point, they should actually do something about it.
What are you most worried about, Julian? For abortion rights.
Wow. You're not fooling anybody, man. You're not fooling anybody anymore. You can't say, give me money, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and then when you're asked specifically what are you going to do, you go, and I've given you guys the historical examples. I've told you how FDR dealt with a rogue authoritarian court. We told you how Abe Lincoln dealt with a rogue authoritarian court. We've given you, even if you are an institutionalist, there are ways to address this. In fact, here, let me pull it up. Things Biden could do. Number one, set up abortion clinics on federal land inside red states. That's Elizabeth Warren's idea. Federal telehealth service for free abortion pills. Funding for abortion clinics and travel vouchers in nearby states. You could do those. That's even if you are an institutionalist. Another thing you could do if you're an institutionalist, just make one exception to the filibuster. Say on abortion issues or on Roe versus Wade, where we've created a workaround from the filibuster on this specific issue, and then you codify Roe versus Wade into law. Shit, even a watered down version of codifying it into law that can get Manchin and Sinema on board. Whatever it is, do something. And we're going to get to a story in a little bit. They ain't doing Dickie McGee's acts. Nothing. Well, it's astonishing how terrible the Democrats are. It truly is. Now, we're dealing with inflation and high gas prices and all of these problems. And Biden's poll numbers are terrible. I mean, he's happy if he even cracks 40% these days. He's below where Trump was at this time in his presidency. So he's doing poorly. Here comes this horrendous ruling, which is effectively a political gift to the Democrats, which can fire up the Democratic base to go vote for Democrats. And they're squandering it. How are they squandering it? by not doing anything and broadcasting that they're not going to do anything. Joe Biden and this Democratic Party is not up for the challenge of the day. They're just not. They're just not. They don't have a single ounce of fight in them. And again, I'll get to this later because they don't really care. Biden certainly doesn't really care about this particular issue. So you're not fooling the voters anymore, man. You are not fooling the voters anymore. They're on to you. Now, granted, we'll admit these are activists. These are protesters. These are the people who care enough to get out there in the streets. And they're chanting voting blue is not enough. They're saying, hey, it's flat out offensive that you're reaching out to me and asking for money while simultaneously saying you're not going to do anything. But when you look at the polls on this issue and you look at the lack of fight from Biden and the Democrats, I think this is, the conclusion is inescapable. It's inescapable. They're going to be doomed. They're going to be doomed politically unless they do something. And if you think the Republicans are going to stop now, you got another thing coming, baby. I mean, they've been focusing on overturning Roe for decades, but really, in their heart of hearts, what do they want? They want a national abortion ban, and they want to punish anybody who even tries to find a workaround to an abortion ban. So even if you're in a red state and you want to travel somewhere where you can get an abortion, well, now there's legislation that they're contemplating that could crack down on you and criminally punish you for that. So this is not good, man. This is not good. I don't know how else to say it. We've been warning about this for a long period of time. And let me just say, in conclusion, in 2020, I tweeted this thread about how the court is going to enter a new Lochner era. The Lochner era is a period of Supreme Court history where you had justices who were judicially activist but politically conservative. Because, the right always targets the left with, the left is doing judicial activism. They're legislating from the bench is the thing that they like to say. They accuse the Democrats of doing that and left-leaning judges of doing that all the time. What they don't tell you is there are also judicial activists on the right. And the Lochner era was exactly that. So they ruled in the Lochner era that businesses, so employers and employees, have what's called a right to contract. They interpreted that into the Constitution. Now, it's not there. It's not there. They made it up. But they said, the Constitution provides for a right to contract, which means that if an employer and an employee make a deal, the federal government cannot interfere with that deal in any way, shape, or form. So what that means is child labor laws, unconstitutional. Minimum wage laws, unconstitutional. Overtime rules, unconstitutional. And they basically mandated, it's like state-mandated anarcho-capitalism. And the results of it were exactly what you would expect. Workers who worked way too hard for way too long of hours, didn't get paid nearly enough. It gave all of the power to the employers. And this court, over an extended period of time, was judicially activist, but politically conservative. We've now entered a new Lochner era. And we're seeing it right now with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And there's going to be other examples of it too. I mean, Clarence Thomas is openly talking about let's revisit gay marriage. Obergefell, there's no actual right to gay marriage. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of your right to contraception. There's no right to contraception. Let's get rid of that. And they're going to go down the list. They've consistently been terrible on economic issues. Now they're going to add social issues as well. So buckle up for it. And again, I think people intuitively understand the Democrats aren't up to the moment. Because if you're not even going to show us even a fight over the most mild of ways to push back, well then you're broadcasting to the world how useless you are. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.